feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
All right, this is the Danemore NBA podcast. Let's go. We're at Falling Knife Brewing Company. Between games 3 and 4 here, 42-point win last night. A game where Anthony Edwards had 30 points in less than 30 minutes, which is perfect timing for our special guest today. We got Wolves beat writer from the Star Tribune and author of the book. And does that feel like normal yet? Yeah,
Absolutely not.
Yeah, for Chris Hine.
Thank you.
We also have Kyle, who just keeps flying back and forth from Portland to come out to these. You guys can clap for Kyle too. Get my cord here. Let's talk about last night. I mean, what we're going to do here is we'll talk about the game last night. We obviously want to talk to Chris a lot about the book and what kind of that whole process was. There's a ton of Chris has been like taking screenshots and sending them to Kyle and I for like 6 months. So I feel like
is this good? Is this bad? Is this good? I don't know. You tell me.
It's all good. The other cover was not good. This is I like this cover. We voted with the orange one. But so we're gonna talk about the game last night. We're gonna talk about Chris's book, and then we also did a podcast like 12 hours ago. So we're gonna let you guys come up here and ask a bunch of questions, and we'll sort of let this carry us. But I think the biggest thing from last night, right, is this version of Ant, Chris. And, not that he had a bad game too, but he had like 39-6 in that game. And it was so different than the 39-6 last night that he had, and the way the crowd kind of rolled with him and elevated this team to a different level. I mean, what is this version of Ant, and can it sustain?
It's the version that we saw. I think he took his time to navigate the Lakers series, took his time to navigate the Warriors series, figuring out the coverages, figuring out the defense. And this is, if you remember, Warriors game 3 was when it seemed like he really arrived in that series. It felt like he really arrived in this series last night. And I think especially on the defensive end of the floor, you guys hit on this in last night's podcast, but just the energy that he plays with on the defensive end. When Finch got on him after game 1 of the Warriors series for not setting the tone, I felt like it was as much defensively as it was offensively. And that was evident last night, very evident from the jump, that when he's flying around and just infusing the team with that sort of effort and energy, it's infectious, it's contagious, as with most things that Ant does on the team. And that even more than the offense was the key to why last night turned into the game that it was. It felt to me a lot like game 6 of the Denver series last year, kind of a similar vibe. They had lost three in a row in that series. They came home, and I think putting a shellacking on Denver and then putting a shellacking on Oklahoma City last night, I think it has a psychological effect more than eking out a 4 or 5 point win. I think last night was probably good for their psyche to know that they can do this to this team, that, as much as Oklahoma City put it on them in the first 2 games, they're able to put it on them too, and answer them right back in a similar fashion. So I think in the psychological back and forth of the series, last night was so immense, not just for Ant, but the team as a whole.
I agree 1,000%. And you were trying to get like Finch or the players to like
they weren't Finch didn't take the bait. Mike took it a little bit last night, but Finch didn't take the bait on that question.
You have any thoughts after 12 hours of
Well, Dane loves starting these pods off talking about basketball, but you mentioned the V word of vibes. So one of the things I liked last night is the story of game 2. There was many, but one of them was just benching Julius Randle and not playing in the fourth quarter. And I said last night to Dane that I thought they found some stuff that they could bottle up in that fourth quarter. I think they found they were just finally like, enough is enough. Like, we want to play mad. But then Julius talked last night about how much Ant played a role in kind of like coming to practice next day, and Julius is hot, and Ant's like, yo, just like shake it off. Like, we'll get into the book specifically, but just some of the stuff that you've learned being around Ant really close this last year. Like, how are you such a good leader at 23 years old?
He's, as you'll see in the book, not just with teammates, but in general, people around him, older people, like decades older than he is, marvel at his ability to read a room, ability to read people, and his kind of emotional intelligence, IQ, when it comes to understanding people.
EQ.
I don't know, is that the term? I
Oh,
don't
my
know.
mom
You
said that to
tell
me one time. I think that's real.
But that's what people like, whether it was 14, 15 years old, like, and at that point in time, as Ant was rising through kind of the recruiting ranks, people were trying to get their hooks in him, and he could read who maybe didn't have his best intentions at heart and who did. And he's always just had this innate ability to know how to deal with people, to be a bit of a politician, as one person told me, like just knows how to navigate a room and navigate the emotions of different people. It's kind of a gift that he's had ever since he was a teenager.
I mean, we've seen that since, I mean, his rookie year was the COVID year, so we weren't in the locker room. But the second year, right, is when we got to kind of get.
Third year was when we were in the locker room.
Okay.
Second year was the podium press conferences. Yeah.
It was really apparent to me, and I think all of us that were covering him. And you don't see this, like you see when he gets to the table, or you see the clips that go around of him joking, and he's hilarious. I mean, he's hilarious. He's an entertainer. He's all these things. But I sometimes, like, when I'm there, I just like to sort of watch the way that he interacts with his teammates, and he's very much like the person who is aware of what the other person across the room is thinking or feeling, and I don't think that's at all. You wouldn't necessarily gather that just from watching him play basketball,
Right.
or watching the interviews, or watching him crack a joke. I do, as this has been, Kyle, like you were saying, like a story of these playoffs, is Ant the leader, and a lot of my friends are like, oh, like what is that? As you said, like what is behind it? And it's that. I think it's this like astute awareness of what is going on around him from a personality standpoint. Now, there's the basketball stuff that, like you said at the beginning,
Right.
and he's 23 years old. And so maybe that isn't like boom, 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 I get all of it right away. It takes him a game in these series to understand how he's being guarded. But the superpower is that emotional intelligence that all of his teammates are like so in on. And you see that when we interview them of, Ant gasses me up, and that isn't, it's genuine. It is genuine. And I think it's why Naz Reid has accelerated in a way. I think Terrence Shannon, like from last night, Ant and TJ are like super, super tight. He's leading in a way that is like distinctly him, but it's very, very much leadership.
He's always had that innate leadership, but the one thing that he didn't have is kind of what people may think of as like a traditional leader, which is like that rah, I'm going to get up in front of the team and make a speech kind of leadership. He's always,
I'd love to see that,
shied away from that. Right. He's always kind of shied away from that, at least early in his career, because I think he felt it was inauthentic, and he was 20, 21 years old, and there were, guys like Pat Bev on the team and older guys on the team who could fill that role. But even though he was the best player at that point in time. But now at 23, 5 years into the league, the best player on the team, keys to the franchise, all that, I think he feels it a little more. So he feels like he has the right now, and at this point in his career, to say stuff in front of the team, to be that kind of vocal leader. Whereas 2-3 years ago, it would have felt forced. And if there's anything about Ant that we know, it's he's a very genuine, that his authenticity comes across. So that always felt maybe a little fake to him,
right?
That sort of leadership. But now it doesn't feel as fake to him anymore.
I remember at media day, so this is literally 48 hours after they made the cat trade, and I remember we were doing our podcast right after that, and I remember I asked Ant about, okay, like, you are the best player on the team, like, like that is clear, like there is a leadership role that comes with that. There isn't the Pat Bev anymore. Carl isn't here anymore. He's as tenured as anybody on this team other than Naz Reid, and obviously he starts, and Naz Reid comes off the bench. And Ant on that he did not have his head wrapped around like what this is going to be like to be the relied upon leader. Remember when we were talking about that, and we were talking about, that is probably, it'll be understandable if he's not able to put that all together at 23 years old. And it kind of looked like during the headlights at that time, I was like, I don't know if Ant is going to be able to handle that. But the way he has, I mean, I think that's as much of a personality story, at least, as anything for this team this year.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Chris should dive into in the next segment. But like Ant was great last night, but the reason I woke up today hungover is because of one specific player. And you and I went to practice today to get some questions about this, but the Terrence Shannon Jr. game, if we're going to keep talking about last night and get Chris's opinion, that was the Terrence Shannon Jr. game. He comes off the bench, has his best game of his career, has that first moment where he, cuts, gets the end one. Mike Conley loses his mind. But today at practice, when we're talking to Finch, and I think it's important because as a fan myself, the one thing that's really hard is like you hear talk about culture and chemistry and all the behind the scenes stuff, but you don't see it. And if you don't see it, it's hard to like figure it out. But you're there as much as anyone and you're on the road all the time. What have you kind of seen, like being with the team on the road or behind the scenes of just like Finch talked about today, those young guys are beloved by the older guys. And like Mike is as happy when Terrence scores as when Mike scores. Like what have you seen about this culture and this new version of the Timberwolves?
There's a new dynamic that's kind of emerged this season. I wrote a little bit about it back in like January, February, but Ant, Nas, Jaden, they're year 5, Nikhil. I throw Nikhil in this group as well, like year 5, year 6 in the league, right? So they're not older veterans like in their 30s, but they're not young, they're not rookies, they're not inexperienced anymore. So there's kind of this dynamic that's formed of these guys being like kind of a big brother kind of role to some of these younger guys like Terrence Shannon, like Rob and Jalen Clark, to where they're able to offer constructive advice and they don't shy away from offering constructive advice. If you go back and look at some clips from earlier in the season, you heard Rob talking about some of the stuff Ant was telling him, and Ant, doling some advice out to Rob on how he was navigating his first season. I think it's that way with TJ too. And even though TJ's
It's a good
24,
yeah.
24,
He's
but
older than Ant.
He's older than Ant, but it's still his first year in the league. And I think one of the things, and TJ did his press conference with Nas last night, those two seem to be pretty close just from observing them on the road. Like they seem to be, they're always laughing together in the locker room. You see that I see them kind of on the floor a lot. Like I think TJ and Nas are also super close. And it just, there is that dynamic that has emerged where these young guys that you've seen for, 5-6 years now, they're starting to step into more of these big brother kind of leadership roles and kind of showing the ropes, so to speak, to some of these young guys that you have to be patient and the patience will pay off. You want to play now, but look at everybody who's ahead of you. Look at the pedigree of everybody that's in that top 8. And it's not easy to crack that rotation. And here are the things you have to do to crack it. And hearing that from your peers, as opposed to hearing it from Finch or your player development coach or your assistant coaches, it's a little different dynamic when these guys have gone through it themselves and say, this is the way it kind of has to be, versus, them being in their own heads about playing time or whatnot.
I think you mentioned like the younger guys, the Nikhil's 26, so kind of like the 26 and younger guy. There's that crew, like you definitely see them hanging out. Jalen Clark's in that too. Jaden McDaniels is in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the incumbent dudes in their 30s, Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley, who both do take, I think, an important leadership role there too. Mike's seen everything,
sure,
been in the league for 20 years. Rudy's the leader of the defense, and that all lines up and makes sense. You bring in Julius Randle, and he is 30, and he's in the midst of his prime, and he is coming from being the top dog in New York there. And I think for Ant, that was going to be a calculus to sort of figure out over the course of the season. We were all like, oh, Julius Randle, Finch likes him. I don't know. Like, how is this going to all work? And I think part of it was just the sort of that pecking order that goes down. And that is, and Finch deserves a lot of credit there too, but that Julius and Ant have figured that dynamic out of the 1-2 punch there is huge. And I think is a credit to Ant, but also Julius too, that they've embraced. How have you seen that over the years?
I think it's that kind of triangle, so to speak, of like Julius having faith in Finch from their previous time together, Finch having the faith in Julius, and then Ant just always wanting to be the ultimate positive teammate. Like it goes badly for the first 20, 30 games, whatever it was, and they're struggling to find their way. But even though there may have been frustration, it's not like Ant was going to give up on Julius is a teammate or that this fit was going to work. And we even heard Ant earlier in the season say, like, we want Julius to be Julius and we'll fit around you. Like, that's his natural inclination to kind of
that was the second game in Sacramento. Right, I was there, and he was like, "Let us fit around you." And Julius had this big game, and
as it turned out, that maybe not was the answer. It was Julius fitting around the rest of the team, which eventually unlocked this team later in the season. But the intention was the right intention, which is, you're here, you're really good, do what you do well, and we'll figure it out. So coming in and having that right intention, I think was important. And I think to the culture aspect of it, I mean, look, when it comes to Julius, I mean, how many times earlier in the season, the body language police were out, and it's you had the quote about the DMV, right? I've seen better body language with the DMV. Was one of my favorites.
That place is a hellhole, and it's still happier than when Julius wouldn't throw the ball to Rudy in Toronto.
So, but think of how much you've mentioned. We've mentioned that throughout the course of the season. It's been like 0, right? Like, I think Julius looked around and realized what the culture of this team was: defense first. And it was leaning into being that playmaker and facilitator. And once he embraced kind of the culture of this team, which is set from the top down, from Finch on down, look what happened. Right. And I think that's what fans sometimes don't see when if they're getting on Finch for not calling timeouts, the rotation, whatnot. It's this sort of behind the scenes stuff that goes into coaching that you don't really see, setting that culture, setting that tone, and managing players throughout the ups and downs of their season.
And we don't see all of that either, but all three of us were in the locker room before the game last night, and Julius Randle was in the best mood.
He was super happy.
Julius Randle had no idea that tomorrow was a national holiday.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, like, what are you doing on Monday? He's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's a holiday. He's like, well, I got to work.
I got to work. We all have to work. Yeah.
He got benched in game 2.
Right.
And then he's walks in the locker room over there, and I'm like, uh-oh, where's his head going to be at? And he's just joyful. I'm like, okay, maybe that's performative. We're the media. Like, we know he got benched. What was that? And then he comes out in the first quarter, and he was just feeling himself. He hits that first. He hits one right in the middle of the lane, and then he hit that one in the corner.
Yeah,
fade away. It was like, whoa, no, yes, and he was just like, there was, I think, and that wouldn't all be Ant. That's an Ant and Finch shared sort of leadership thing, but I don't think Julius Randle was that quickly moving on from what his previous emotion was, prior to this season, this team, and whatever the, I don't know, sort of like dichotomy of leadership is in this group. And this team obviously is not here right now without this version of Julius Randle playing the way he is right now.
Which game was it? Was it in the Lakers series or maybe it was game 5 of the Warriors series that
all blends?
It really does at this point, but I think it was game 5 of the Warriors series where the second half starts and he made like 2 turnovers or something like that. Finch pulls them, and you could see Julius is just visibly angry on the bench, right? And then he cools back down. I think he said Joe Ingles might have cooled him down a little bit, and then he comes back in and he plays well. It's like these guys aren't afraid to show their emotions, to show their disappointment, to show their anger in the moment.
Totally normal.
Totally
I would
normal.
do the same shit.
Totally normal, right? They're not suppressing it. So I'm sure Julius felt a little. You want to play. You want to play in the fourth quarter of the Western Conference Finals. But I think it's what happens in the aftermath of when the initial emotion wears off, when you get a night of sleep, you come back to the facility the next day, the conversations you had, and it sounds like Finch and Julius had a very productive conversation. They both left that in a good space. And sure enough, last night happens as a result of it. It's how you deal with the aftermath of that initial disappointment, that, you don't let it linger. You talk about it openly. You don't let it become like the elephant in the room. You address it, and then you move on.
I want to transition to the Sunday book club, but put you on the spot a little bit. you don't have to put any money on this, but what you're as close to the team as anyone, as any reporter is to any team. What do you expect tomorrow night at Target Center for Game 4?
I expect the closest game of the series. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not a stretch to say because they've all been blowouts pretty much, but I feel like the Wolves have arrived in this series now.
They believe a little bit.
They
Yeah.
believe a little bit. They're a little mad.
Yeah.
I think with this team, one of the things that I've noticed, and you saw it in the Denver series last year a little bit, which is I think one of the reasons why they were able to take down Denver, is sometimes they have a belief that despite what national media might say, despite what the perception is of the rest of the league, I think they think they're just better than the dudes on the other team sometimes. And I think they
100% think they're better
Yes.
than the Thunder.
Yes. And I think they finally are like, we can't let these dudes run us off the floor. These guys, absolutely not. There's like a different kind of, not disrespect, but like, it's just, we just think we're better than you. And we're going to go out.
This would be such a great
crush you.
time for just like an organic Wolves in 6 chant just to break up.
But
Organic.
but I think that they felt that in that Denver series. Like, I think they looked at Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. and they're like, we can beat these guys.
Right.
Like, even though nobody on the outside was giving them a shot. And I think they think that about the Thunder too. I really do.
The first person you have to ask to know what the team thinks of the other team is the quietest player on the
Jaden
team.
McDaniels. Yep.
Like, nah, they suck.
100%.
I do want to have time for questions, so let's get into the book a little bit more specifically. I want to ask you about like the process of it all, but first, Chris and I don't have the same job, but we're both covering the team, and in this, and when it's the playoffs and stuff like that, it is very nice to, when the season is over, like take the summer off, or like
Yes.
kind of take the summer. I mean, you come back for the draft and like summer league, a little bit of that. I always
Right.
kind of have like a teacher's schedule.
Yeah.
You know, where you're not doing nothing in the summertime, but like it's definitely less than you were doing during the regular, during the
Right,
normal
right.
part of the year. And what Chris did last summer was right after the Western Conference Finals, you moved to Atlanta.
August, July and August.
You
yeah.
moved in the
But
summer
essentially,
to
I moved in
Atlanta,
the summer. Yeah.
which sounds to me just terrible. I was like, you're texting me, and I'm like, I am not doing that. I'm not doing anything right now. And that is like, in all seriousness, this was a feat, for you to take on. I think all of us sitting here, there's so many pages. I don't know how I would do
We
that.
got to 200. Yeah.
That's a real accomplishment. And just, for all of you, know that's a lot of work on top of writing hundreds and hundreds of pages of paper, for the paper. But yeah, just kind of talk a little bit about how the process started and what this summer of researching it looked like.
Yeah, it was. It really started about 3 years ago. I did a big story on Ant in 2022, and it was about maybe 3,500, 4,000 words for the Star Tribune. And I went to Atlanta for like 4 days, and it was all about his upbringing in Atlanta, his early life, and how he ended up getting to where he is. And last year, before Game 7 of the Denver series, I was fortunate to make a connection with the publisher at HarperCollins. And that afternoon, I ended up with a book deal. I gave them that story that I did 3 years ago, and I said, here's the book, just expanded,
Bigger.
but 10 times the amount of words.
Yeah.
In that. I ended up being 20 times the amount of words, but they liked the idea. They loved it. So basically, it's first half of the book is pre-NBA years. Second half is his time with the Timberwolves. And I knew I had to go to Atlanta. Like I just did, because as much as you can interview and talk to people on the phone, like actually taking people out to lunch, going to dinner, is the best way to conduct interviews and really get to know people, have them trust you as a reporter and a writer. And so I got an Airbnb in Atlanta for the whole month of August, and I drove from Minneapolis to Atlanta. I stopped in Chicago. I stopped in Cincinnati to visit some friends along the way. Gave myself a little 5-day kind of trip to connect with some friends before I entered this process. And it was great. Honestly, like overall, it was great. There were some very challenging moments. Like there were moments where I was in my own head about a lot of it. Didn't know how it was going to come together. Didn't know if I was good enough to write it. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. Did not. I'm like, who the hell am I to be writing this book? You know, like what the hell? Definitely a lot of tough nights, but the work was always fun. Like when I got to a place where I had some interviews in the tank and I had them transcribed and I was working on a certain section, like just being able to sit back for a few hours in an afternoon and just write it was a lot of fun. And that's where the joy in the process really came out. And I hope that you get that when you read it.
It between all the late texts we've had over the last year and the portions you've sent to me. I mean, I think of this for you and I, or I think about this for you, because like your podcast has exploded and you're one of the hardest working people I know. But I like wonder some days, like, are we here doing this today because of this 23-year-old and how far he has elevated this franchise? Yep. And everyone in here, I speak for most people listening or here, that like he's probably your favorite athlete. He's probably the best athlete right now in the state, and he might go down depending on what he can do in championship level moments, the best athlete the state has ever had. And if I'm going to devote that much of my life to him, I want to know about him. And I think the one thing I want to stress to start with this is like, this isn't just like some funny jokes and a basketball reference book. Right. Like this is who Anthony Edwards was before any of us knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff that you've gotten into in this book, I mean, it is incredible. You could name drop anyone you want that you've talked to. I mean, from his family to Steve Kerr to Kevin Durant, like all those people have played a significant role in this. And I would imagine landing those interviews is not easy. That's not just a DM slide, but like what was one of the things, especially in Atlanta where he's from and he's so proud. And I think of that mural that has Aunt and his grandma and his mom, like what was, without reading the entire book to us, like what was one of the big things you learned about
could do that too
Aunt before the November 2020 when he was kind of introduced to our lives? What did you learn about Aunt before then?
I think the big thing, I touched on it before, is just that emotional intelligence, that knack for navigating all these different situations that get thrown in your direction. You're 13 years old and you know, your two biggest cheerleaders, his mother Yvette and his grandmother Shirley, pass away, and he's got his siblings, and you know, he says his sister Antoinette was such an important part of his life at that moment in time. But he's also staying with families of teammates and people at school, and his uncle Drew, who you see in the Netflix documentary, who's such an important part of his life as well, from when time he was about 7-8 years old. And it's just all these people that helped keep him on the right path, helped keep him motivated. If he needed a ride, if he needed a place to stay, if he needed, you know, something to eat, whatever it was, he had this network of people that were looking out for him, that really cared about him. It's a story of not just Ant, but it's a story of this community of people that a lot of whom are still in Ant's life in one way or another, who just made sure he got to the finish line, you know, that he got to November 2020 and became the #1 pick. And you'll meet a lot of these people in the book, people who Ant still holds very close to him, who are either here in Minnesota with him, or they're frequently here or drop it in on the road. There's dozens of people like that you'll meet in the book.
Because it's very cliche, but you hear athletes all the time be like, I'm not supposed to be here. But when you read about Chris's book, like Anthony Edwards had every excuse not to be here because the deck was really stacked against him. Like I'm in my mid 30s and I think about losing a parent and I'll cry on the spot, which I've done before. Like losing those two type of support people in your life at 13 and all the stuff he's gone through. It just shows that, I mean, the stuff that we talked about in segment 1 about him being just like a natural leader and kind of uplifting all those around him, that's just kind of who he's always been, because he didn't really have any other choice.
That's who his mother was.
Yeah.
Like she was very positive, always uplifting him, not just him, but his teammates too. She, you know, I have a little thing in there about how for his AU team, she showed up at a tournament once and she made hoop earrings with the numbers of all the players for all the other moms on the team. Like she was doing that sort of stuff. And so when you see Ant as like the ultimate positive teammate, comes from his mother, and his grandmother was always good energy, was always happy. And his grandmother, Shirley, she battled cancer off and on. But whenever she would show up at an arena, it was, people told me like she was always in good spirits, always whatever was bothering her, she didn't, let anybody really see it, but she was always positive around him. And I think that's where that comes from for him.
You were around Team USA this summer a little bit, and Kyle mentioned Steve Kerr. It was funny during the second round series, Chris gave Steve Kerr one of the books.
I did.
And he goes, "Oh, great." The guy who's been tormenting me for the whole series. He goes, I now have to have this sitting up my that was
He was great. Steve Kerr and Ray Ritter, the PR head of PR for the Warriors, who's awesome. Steve Kerr actually talked to me twice for the book, so I really thank him for that. He talked to me before the Olympics and then after the Olympics, because the Warriors played a pretty big part of the pre-draft process with Ant too.
And Durant is in there. What are I mean, you don't have to give it all away, but like who are maybe a cool anecdote from whether it's a coach or a player who's in the in the
or
league,
degenerate gambler who was playing blackjack with him one night.
Kyle is name checked in the book, by the way, everybody. He got
awesome.
in there. He got in there.
You just degenerate gambler.
That's right.
That's my friend John.
Well, kind of along the lines of what we were talking about. There's a story from his time at Georgia. It doesn't really Tom. There's somebody kind of famous from this anecdote. It's Tom Crean, the coach. But they were the Maui Invitational, and they did not have a good Maui Invitational. Even though he had that game against Michigan State where he went crazy, they still lost that game.
Yep.
And they lost almost the entire time they were in Maui. So on the last day of the Maui Invitational, they played Chaminade, which is the host school, which is like I think D2, right? So if you lose to Chaminade, it's like, it's not good. And they were tied late in that game, and Ant hit a 3 at the buzzer that lifted them to a win over Chaminade. So they win the game, but they're not feeling good about it. Everybody's kind of upset about how they played, and Tom Crean and Ant's college roommate, Ty Fagan, they told me kind of about this anecdote after the game. They're in this small locker room in the gym in Maui because it's more like a high school gym than it is a college gym. And one of his teammates started just ripping into Crean, really upset about his playing time, about his minutes. And it was, I think as Crean might have said, kind of disrespectful. And Ant was the one who spoke up and said, "Hey, listen, man, we're not doing this. You're not doing this. We won. Doesn't matter. Like your playing time, my playing time, anybody else's playing time, how much we score, this and that. Doesn't matter. We don't talk to coach like this. We don't do this. Sit down, essentially." And
that's what I'm talking about. Of like, we see the funny Ant. You see him doing his little hand thing or whatever. He all this stuff. But there's that stuff that we don't see, or like maybe you get a little like track the pack background sort of thing. Like he is an entertainer, and like some of that of what we're all like have seen for 100 games this season. There's that version, and there is something beneath that ties into the leadership we were talking about too. But frankly, like ties into a part of his personality that I don't think us globally know, but you do from this.
You do, and that's the goal of the book, is to really tell these stories about who Ant is, what he's like behind the scenes, and just more than what you see on the cameras, what you see on the highlights, the post-game interviews and whatnot. And I think that's what I want people to come out of here with, is just a better understanding of who he is as a person, what drives him, what he's been through in his life, the people that he holds close to him and why he holds them close, and why he hasn't really expanded his circle ever since he's entered the NBA.
It is the same people.
It is the same people that nobody knew was really coming in and out of his life. It's the same core group of people that have been there really from high school.
Right.
A lot of them have been there. Like nobody really knew.
A whole 5 years ago.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. A whole 5 years ago, way back when in 2019. Yeah, no, yeah. So, but even that, like, you hear that all the time. It's like people let the wrong people into their lives, and I think he always had a knack from an early age to stick with the people that got him here, and just be careful of others. And yeah, and then there's some anecdotes there. Like I said, I want to give too much away, but there's a little anecdote about Game 7 of the Denver series in there that ties into his leadership as well. And you'll see that when you read the book. I'm leaving that one in the book.
There you go. Which you guys can, or if you're listening to this, at home as well. There's a link in the show notes to purchase the book. You can pre-order it. It comes out right June 3rd.
June 3rd, yep.
Is when it'll be in bookstores and everything. And the books you brought sold right away. But yeah, get this. I mean, perfect for summer. Like, I'm gonna read it.
Yeah.
Right
Hey,
away.
this is my spiel. I was gonna say, because people always ask you and I, like, how do we support the pod? And we always say, you've always heard this catch line of like, support those that support us. So shout out to Dan. I'm sure we'll give you the mic in a sec, from Falling Knife. If you're not at Target Center in Minneapolis, I mean, the second best place to be for a Timberwolves game is here. They have thousands of people outside, and their whole staff does a great job. And I will take a third beer. That's awesome. Thank you. But also too, like, in terms of support those that support us, Chris has been a huge part of this podcast for Dane. Because Chris is on the road all the time, and it sounds fun. Like, everyone here probably has a job except Ty for your little guy. Like, work travel kind of sucks, actually. And like, Chris is a lot of 5:30 flights, and he is my friend, and you busted your ass on this book. And I would imagine too, like, you're writing the book on Ant. Don't fuck it up. And you haven't. And it is so good. But like, also too, like, I want my friend to be like, I don't want him to be Chris Hine in my phone. I want him to be like New York Times best-selling Chris Hine in my book. So we're out of books now.
Yeah.
But explain quickly, like, pre-orders matter, and it's $30. And it's like something that if you buy a copy, go find Chris this summer at a bar or a patio, sign this, and he'll sign it. And he'll write his favorite Mariah Carey lyric in there. So
that's right.
Where can people right now that we're out of hard copies, where can people buy this book between now and June 3rd when it starts to hit bookshelves?
So like Dane said, HarperCollins, my publisher, has a link that can direct you to various sellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but also independent bookstores if you want to support your local independent bookstores. I'll be doing an event at Majors and Quinn on shoot, I can forget the date, but mid-June.
Don't look at me.
Right, I know. Right. Like Dane knows my schedule. But I will be doing an event at Majors and Quinn, middle of June. It's the day before Game 6 of the NBA Finals. So whether or not the Wolves are in the finals or not, I will be doing that event. There we go. But honestly, like, if you order it from, let's say, a major retailer like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, honestly, though, I see a lot. I see the thumbs down. I get it. They are the biggest retailers, and if you leave 5-star reviews and things like that on those websites, that really helps.
We need to help Chris sell this book, because Chris put so much energy into this.
Yeah.
And it
buying and leaving the 5-star reviews, even if you thought it was 1 star, leave a 5-star review anyway.
And it is, as of right now, at 23 years old, in his second trip to the Western Conference Finals, it is the comprehensive book on Anthony Edwards. And I would imagine down the road, maybe we get another one from you. But for right now, I mean, you're going to get to know everything you didn't know about Ant up until this point. So I'm proud of you as a friend, and I think you've done an amazing job. And again, one more time for Chris.
We have a fourth microphone right here. If you want to ask a book specific question, you want to ask something about the game. Normally half these questions are about who are we going to trade. We can do that too. You're ready. Avril Lavigne. Let's go.
Yes, let's do it.
Let go. All right.
Why just? Oh, sorry, I was gonna sing it. Chris, if Mariah Carey and Rihanna had a song battle, and it was a 7-game song series, Mariah starts at home, who wins?
I'm going to say Mariah, but this is no dis.
Wait, sorry, you love Mariah. Here's my joke question.
Yeah.
What are
that wasn't it?
To take the stress off of the current question mark of the rest of this season, and you don't have to talk forever about it, but like, what does next year's roster look like roughly? And do you think Conley and Ingles could just jump to coaching?
Tim, I think, I mean, Mike's playing pretty well right now. I feel like that's been a big turn in this series. I don't know what his plus minus was last night, but that was, we were talking about that after game 2 of the 2 games they lost in Oklahoma City. In I think it was the 51 minutes Mike had played, they'd won by 19 points. And the 45 minutes he'd sat, they'd lost by 60. He is extremely important to this team, even if you see a 2 for 6 shooting line and 2 assists or whatever it might be. I think specifically in this series, with the ball pressure that Oklahoma City has, they need a point guard. And there's, even if you put Terrence Shannon Jr. in the 9-man rotation, there's one point guard that plays on this team, and it's Mike Conley, and that's important for this series. But he has also been, I don't know if you talked to him for the book, but certainly just covering the team.
I did.
Mike has had a hugely important role in the mentoring of Ant, and frankly, I think is a big part of the reason why Ant has played so much better in games 2 and 3, or in all of the series, like kind of been like, game 1, and it turns. You talk about the film sessions, you talk about Finch and stuff like that. A lot of it is Mike as a player actually like walking him through X, Y, and Z of this is how they're guarding you and what they're
Mike has some good stuff about those film sessions in the book to further tease it. But Mike also, I think he is like almost like a quasi assistant coach when it comes to reading defenses and helping Ant break it down. And, you know, obviously Ant's got Chris Hines, my name doppelganger. And he's got Pablo, he's got Finch, but Mike also, but hearing it from Mike, who's on the floor with him in a lot of these situations, who's year 17, right? 18,
I think, yeah.
Like,
full handshake,
you know,
too.
that is as good as it gets when it comes to, you know, experience and the ultimate credibility in these situations to back up what Finch may be saying, or to back up what the coaches may be saying to Ant. When Mike is there saying, coach is right, that carries some weight.
To the question of what does the roster look like next year, I think that's a really important conversation to have once, you know, the Wolves finish up the finals. But I do think, and we've never talked about this yet, but the reason like I'm so into this, and I think the book is the perfect timing and all that stuff, is this is like actually the golden age of Minnesota Timberwolves basketball. And you had someone on a couple months ago that was like really smart and said that the Wolves had like one of the 3 most talented rosters in the West. And you scoffed at that person, but they really do have so, I mean, they traded for Gobert a couple summers ago, and that's changed everything, right? Other than drafting Ant. And when they trade for Gobert, it's like, well, shit, you have no more assets. You can never get a young player on the team. And it's like, you got these 3 young guys that can't see the floor right now until Terrence jumped on last night. So I really do think this is like, I always say this about eating because I love to eat. Like, if you've eaten ramen your whole life and now you get to eat steak a little bit, like, you look at the steak for a second, like, be where your feet are, like, embrace that this thing now, I don't know what it looks like exactly. I don't know if it's Nikhil on the team or if it's Jalen Clark in the spot, but I think you've graduated now. Like Finch said, are you a Western Conference Finals team or you're a team that just made the Western Conference Finals? This is a Western Conference Finals team, an organization now, and whatever they do this summer after this all wraps up, I'm sure there'll be a lot of dominoes and fireworks, but I just think the fans deserve a moment to be like, yo, you made it through a lot of, I was talking to Chad, like, you made it through a lot of Luke Ridnour at the 2 seasons. It's like, now your 2 guards, Anthony Edwards, and there's a book. I don't think Chris wrote a book about Luke Ridnour. Like, that just doesn't sell. So it's I would have read it, but yeah. I think for the fans, it's a good reminder to be like, that's why you got to pull up to Falling Knife and show up to Target Center, because this is finally what I think you kind of always hoped for.
By the way, quick note about Ant in the book. I did not talk to Ant specifically for the book. However, one thing I'm very grateful to Ant for was that he did not get in the way, and he encouraged me to do the book when I first told him about it. And a lot of people that were close to him participated. And because of that, it kind of opened the door for a lot of people to talk, teammates, coaches, both on the Timberwolves and formerly as well. Sometimes when you write books about people, they get a little hesitant to do it. But Ant was very supportive of it from the moment I told him about it, and so I do want to put that on the record. To
That's also perfect because Ant just doesn't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah,
Right,
I was
true
gonna say
too,
that's,
right.
that's the most Ant thing
Yes,
ever.
right.
I'm gonna set this all up, but not talk. To you.
Yeah, right.
That happens in the locker
He was
room a lot.
going to, and then we got into the season, and it didn't happen. But yeah,
Take another question.
I think if you were to look at the major difference between games 1 and 2, I think we won because we shot extremely well in game 3. My question is, like, what do you guys expect OKC to do defensively that's going to be different if we do come out the gate shooting the way that we do shoot? And then obviously I think they are great defensively. One of our best friends, they said, why don't the Wolves just drive? And well, I don't think you can just drive to one of the best defensive teams in the NBA right now. So do you feel like we do need to isolate Chet in some issues too? Because I do think Chet might be one of their worst defenders on the team in terms of a matchup for a lot of our guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last game kind of illustrated, what it is. Like if you do hit the threes, they're leaving the corner open, the weak side corner open every time. Like, and if you hit that, they're going to adjust their defense. It's like moving, like it's not a zone, but it moves with the ball and exposes the perimeter. And where it's moving with the ball is to take away the lane, And I think that was just because game 1 and 2 are a little rough, right? It was a little bit of this open question of if the Wolves start hitting shots, does that open it up for Ant and Julius to get going? And I mean, last night's game got academic pretty quick, but I do think we learned that, right? And the Wolves do have the shooting personnel to be able to knock those down. And I'm a big believer in, like, what is the quality of the shooter, not what the percentage that they're shooting is. Like, what is Dante even shooting 30% in the playoffs? Right. Probably not. But I know Dante DiVincenzo is a really good shooter.
Yes.
And so if you're going to leave him open in the left corner like he was right once he checked into the game there, he hit that first three, in the corner, and that's an adjustment. And you got to remember, if you're the other team, like, Dante DiVincenzo is scary. Naz Reid is scary sitting there. Nikhil hit 40% of his threes this year. I know those guys aren't doing that, but if you hit one, they're gonna. It takes one, maybe two, and they're gonna shift. And that's kind of the way this team is designed. Like, it has to start on the outside, and then the interior opens up. It's Ant and Julius can get in there, and then I think the third step of that is that's when Rudy gets involved, and he's just sitting under the basket, catch it, hopefully dunk, and that's where it goes. But this, given the way Oklahoma City is guarding, I think it has to start by loosening it on the perimeter, and then the lane opens up.
The 3 bench starters were 6 for 9 from 3 last night with Naz, Dante, and Nikhil. And I think we're like, okay, like they shot 50% on like 40 attempts. Like, they're back. I still don't really think, like, I'm waiting for like that Dante's Inferno game where it's like he's 6 for 10 from 3. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't, outside of Ant, had anyone really explode from 3. So in terms of what do you expect in game 4, I think we're all proven right that, like, sometimes just making shots helps, and sometimes being at home on home rims helps. But they played so well last night, but when you look at the box score outside of Ant, who we're promoting here, like, I didn't think anyone had like this crazy out of body experience other than maybe Terrence. But I think there's a lot of, like, Dante only had 6 points on those 2 or 2 threes. Like, I'm still waiting for that Dante. I'm with you. I'm still waiting for that Dante, like, 17-point performance. I'm still waiting for that Naz Reid, like, I'm trying to get that bag 6 weeks from now performance where he gives you 25 and 10. So I think the bench obviously played much better last night, the best they've played in this series. But this team's bench was what you said, their 3rd star. Like, that game is still coming.
I'll say Nikhil had his 2nd straight good game of the series. Yes, last night. And it hadn't been. Lakers series was not really great for him. Warriors series, not really either. So to see Nikhil, I think, have to build 2 straight good games is a sneaky development of last night.
And I think Finch said last night to us that, Terrence is going to continue to play in the series. Obviously, not a novel concept there, but like, what the externality of that would be is if Terrence is going to play 15, 18, 20 minutes, like, somebody has to not,
Yeah.
And so I think it was like Finch was kind of like, all right, like, this has been like 12 games, Dante, Nikhil was like, we do have other options that we can go to, obviously, as indicated by the way that Finch rolled with the 8-man rotation all season. Like, those guys all have a long leash, but it is the Western Conference Finals, and Dante DiVincenzo is shooting how he's been shooting. Nikhil has been erratic. Nas has been, largely erratic in this too. So to the extra star point, like I do believe that this group's bench, particularly when you're going up against another bench group, like there is a delta between Nas Reed and the bench big that's coming in there. That just hasn't really, as crazy as it sounds, it didn't even really show up much in the first 2 rounds, even though they won the both of those. But I think Terrence is insurance for that. And I don't think like in the second round, DiVincenzo got to play, 26, 27 minutes, regardless of how he was shooting. I wouldn't be surprised if like those leashes are a little bit shorter because Terrence played, as well as he did, and Jalen too.
He's now become another dart they can throw. Like you need some of these guys to poke through and find a way to score against this team if other guys are struggling. And the thing with Terrence is, he's probably, I mean, Nas's game is a little different, but like just in terms of his game, he's not just a spot up shooting three the way like Dante or Nikhil is. Like he plays with force, takes people off the dribble. He adds a little different dimension coming off the bench than some of the other guys do too. So, and I think that's just okay. You have Terrence Shannon in the mix now. This is another option you can go to, and you have a reasonable chance of him, hitting and having a productive 12 to 15 minutes for you. Whereas before last night, they didn't have that.
Yeah, there's a difference between being a corner shooter and a corner attack. Like we've seen it. That's been the cool thing that Jaden's added, right? Like he can shoot the corner three or he can attack from the corner. Terrence can attack from the corner, and shoot it reasonably well. We'll take another question here.
All right, so it's great to see you guys in person. It's my first time here, so it's been an honor to just be in a super cool environment. But
Congrats on graduating.
Oh, thank you. My question for you guys, I'm going to give you guys a crazy stat that kind of puts into context how great Anthony Edwards is this early in his career.
Take notes, Chris.
Went through 10 series of ChatGPT to verify this stat. He is the second #1 overall pick in NBA history to make multiple conference finals and make multiple All-NBA teams before the age of 24.
Yeah.
I saw this the other day. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
The first person was Magic Johnson, and he won a championship. So my question for you guys is through your amazing book, I'm super excited to read, and just the maturity we've seen from him over the years. Is Anthony Edwards ready to win a championship as the #1 option at age 23 this season?
I mean, it's possible,
Totally.
right? I mean, think of how close it is. You're 7 wins away from it happening. And you look at the opponent across from you, you look at the opponents in the Eastern Conference, and why not? Like it's hard. It's going to be hard. It's an uphill climb. You're not favored, but it's right in front of you right now. Why not? And so that's why I think when it comes to this team, and I wonder what this run or however the front office and ownership is looking at it. It's like a moment might be here. Like there's no dominant. We hear Chris Finch talk about this all the time. We are not in a dynastic phase of the NBA. The 2010s of LeBron versus Steph and the Spurs being there as kind of the 3 teams that were always in the mix for a decade. That's not happening right now. Denver, we saw Denver win the title, and they've just done nothing but fall off really ever since. Like this is a moment where things are loose in the NBA. Parity is reigning right now. So yeah, this is a moment where before maybe one of those dynastic phases settles back in, where you can get a title. It's possible. It's like, and I talked to Chris Hines about this a little bit last week. It didn't make it into the story I wrote, but he and Ann have kind of talked about these little moments in NBA history, like the 2006 Heat team when Dwayne Wade pokes through with Shaq and they win a title, or like when Jordan wins his first title with the Bulls, which comes off of the end of the dynastic 80s of the Lakers and Celtics and Pistons, and now it's the Bulls that are emerging. Like they've talked about these moments in NBA history where go and try to take it. Like nobody says you have to be 27 years old to win your first title. Like they've that's something that he and Chris Hines have talked about.
I'm not trying to preach on a Sunday here, but the 2020 draft was the big draft for us, because that's when we kind of pivoted into podcasting and everyone's stuck at home with COVID. And like, we're trying to just, I mean, I know every player from that thing. Like, you want to ask me Patrick Williams stats? I got you.
Neesmith, man.
Right, exactly. But what I think is important to remember from that, and not to lecture, but like to just take a second and like buy this book and like read about it, is like, no, what you just said, not a fucking person thought Ant would do that. No, that was a bad draft, right? You don't even want to have the first pick. Does he even like basketball? He's a wide receiver, right? All that shit. And now for you to say
chapter 6, by the way, chapter 6. All that is covered in chapter 6.
To do all that and to be in some ChatGPT stat with Magic Johnson, dude, like that's, people said in November and October and, you know, of 2020, like, yeah, you probably don't even want to have the first overall pick in this draft. Like, that's crazy to think about. So to see where he's done already, and like in this series, is he the best player? I don't know. Shea won the MVP. He's probably the best player. Shea's 3 years older than him. Shea's never done what Ant's done at this age. So I think that's another reason to not only plug the book, but just to be excited about this team, because at the end of the day, if he doesn't win a title, like that will change how you kind of look at all of it, because he's so good. He's the best chance this state's ever had to win a title on the men's basketball side. But I just try to embrace sometimes of like when we were doing all those draft pods, and shout out to Wildeberg, you didn't think he was doing this.
No.
You didn't think he was having 64% true shooting percentage on 29 and 9 and 7 in the Western Conference Finals for the second time in 12 months. That's crazy.
Yeah. I had him ahead of Wiseman. I will say this, and then you guys can vouch for this too. Like, what is it, 7 wins away. There's 7 wins away. And what I've learned in covering this team for a while now is how long the season is. How many things have to happen over the course of the season to put yourself in a position to even make the playoffs, to win a playoff series. And I think that is going to be a huge variable over these next couple of weeks is, hey, we're here, you know, and if they don't do it, then then there's a whole nother season coming, and there's a whole second apron thing coming here too.
Right.
And the rosters are going to change. And what's really stood out to me, and you'd vouch for this, is Finch has kind of been on this for a couple months of like, the opportunity is here now, and let go.
Yeah.
Right now, because it is the reality of the situation is right now is the odds that they win the championship at this moment might be higher than it ever is again.
Right.
You know, or at least at a start of a season. There are 7 wins to go. And the degree to which that reality like sinks in to it's definitely Mike Conley understands
Mike Conley
that.
how hard it is to get to the conference
exactly.
finals.
You know what I'm saying? And so and that was what was really encouraging to me about Ant specifically last night, was he was like, his place that I get that, you know, and that sort of ethos permeating through the team and carrying them through the rest of this series and wherever this goes, I think has to be their gas in the tank. And just the reality of the situation, it's so hard to win in the NBA. And you got a little bit of good fortune in the second round. It's like Steph Curry got hurt. Like sometimes you need some of those sort of things to put you in a great spot. And the Wolves are, even before they won by 42 points last night, they were still in a great spot relative to the rest of the league, to their odds of winning a championship. And it's going to be about sustaining that.
And I make this point to people all the time. Ant is 23 years old. And I think 5 years from now, he will be hitting his peak. So as long as he's been in the NBA now already, that length of time is when he will be at what is traditionally an athlete's peak. And he's just gaining so much experience, institutional knowledge of reading the game, reading situations, all this frustration with him the last few years in clutch time situations. 5 years from now, I know it's hard to take the long view of that, but I feel like that's going to pay dividends.
Right.
Like when he's 27, 28 years old, that he's going to have such a knowledge of what to do and just an instinct. Like right now it's I think in a lot of situations he knows what to do, but he's fighting his instincts. I think the right thing will become instinct eventually. And we saw it in that Lakers series a little bit too. in the big moments, I think he's starting to get it. But I tell people all the time, like, look, he's still only 23. Like Michael Jordan, for instance, was like in year 2 or 3 when he was 23 years old, right? So,
but when he's 28, he likely will not have this good of a roster.
That's
so even if he is better, like that.
Yeah.
That's I think that's the sense of urgency that should be lurking right now.
That it is. You just don't know how the league is going to go. You don't know injury luck. All that stuff plays into it. You see some teams even now, Milwaukee or Dallas.
Milwaukee's dead.
Boston being upended by horrible injuries that are not just affecting them this season, but probably next season in the middle of a potential dynastic run for Boston. So you never know when these things are going to hit. You got to take advantage of the moments now.
Let's do a couple more questions here quickly. This is like the quietest it's ever been when we've done this. This is like, you're really listening. Wow.
Hi there.
Hi.
This is just a quick story for Chris. A couple of years ago, I'm listening to a podcast or reading something, and they talked about that Anthony Edwards was working with Chris Hands on his jump shot.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn. He writes a column and starts Tribune, and he goes over and helps Anna his jump shot.
That's right.
Holy cow!
That's
He
right.
really must know his basketball.
Chris has a sweet J.
Months later, I find out there's 2 of you.
Yeah.
So when Ant signed his contract, did you think his assistant coach was going to be writing it, or was that? So my real question is, one of the reasons we won Game 3 was SGA not shooting well. What did we do to shut him down? And we do that again next game? So that's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the physicality from the jump. I think there was in Game 2, right? You guys, like, when it was really apparent, like Shea was just getting to the middle of the floor and getting whatever he wanted. They were setting the screens, really how we talked about this last night, Kyle. And there was this like huge gap between where the screen was being set and where Jaden was.
Right.
You know, at like 35 feet from the basket, and Rudy's at like 18 feet, in retreat. And I think through the physicality, they shrunk some of that gap. They also had Ant specifically in the lane helping more. And I think they did more in that game to prioritize Shea. There's a lot of, Twitter coaches and stuff like that saying, you got to double the ball, you got to put 2 on the ball and this and that. I thought it was a really good game plan and a smart idea against the Thunder in particular, who have solid shooters, but not great shooters. Trusting Ant to kind of be able to be both a help defender on Shea and also recover back out to Dort. I rewatched the first half this morning, and that was really, really apparent. Just that Shea is incredible in the mid range. I mean, he won the MVP, and if you give him space in the middle of the floor, follows aside, like he's going to hit those shots at a high clip. So I think the Wolves shrunk that space by playing more physical and more tightly together, specifically Jaden and Rudy.
I noticed a number of times your point about the screens being set so high. I don't know if you noticed this when you were rewatching. I didn't rewatch it yet, but it felt like Jaden, instead of going under, I mean, the natural inclination when you set a screen 10 feet beyond the 3-point line, whatever it is, just go under the screen, right? Because nobody's pulling up unless you're like Steph Curry or something like that. But I noticed Jaden trying to go over the screens when they were setting them that high out. And I'm like, that's a little different. Like having, instead of just going under and then kind of chasing Shea as he's going downhill, which led to some of the fouls, Jaden was trying to fight over them and just not let him get around the screens, even that far out.
That's physicality, right? The guys said that after the game too. And the physicality of that is like, okay, Hartenstein is screening me. I am going to grab him and throw him and win the physicality of literally this screen. Like that's what, and that Oklahoma City is a great physical team, and they're very good at that. The Wolves did not match that physicality in the game, particularly if you're reliant upon your defense, as both of these teams are. It really makes like the common denominator of who the winner is going to be, of who is the more physical team. And yes, is there the factor of like officiating involved in physicality? For sure. But not of what you're talking about.
Right.
The officiating part comes with the shot, and there's going to be some variance there, and there's going to be some stuff that pisses you off. How the officials call that. But all the rest of the physicality surrounding that, it needs to be a fight. Like the Wolves need to fight that, because that is just who OKC is. Like they did 82 games of fighting and physical. And the Wolves can do that too. Like Jaden's a dog, Rudy's an incredible defender. Like all the Wolves perimeter defenders have the physicality to be able to do that. Sorry, cut into you.
I'm dying to take my shirt off and have a patio beer. So let's do one more question. And
There you go. You have an undershirt?
TBD.
Maybe actually a good segue off of that is the league finally got around to announcing their awards, including all defensive team. Can you talk about what your thoughts are, maybe to the extent you know what the team's thoughts are about the winners of those awards? And I'm not talking Cade Cunningham getting a bag because he made third team All NBA or second team All NBA. I'm talking about reputations on defense, that Caruso gets to defend by violence because he's made an all defensive team before. And Jaden McDaniels didn't make it this year, and Rudy did because maybe he's got 4 all or best defender of the NBA. Like, I feel like they don't pay attention to the league, and the awards are maybe a trailing indicator, or like how a player's perceived is lagging behind the award announcement.
Trailing indicator. Like
This is a Chris Hine question.
I voted once upon a time. Yes, very good question. I voted once upon a time, and then I gave it up almost immediately because I didn't like the conflict of interest of having players I cover and me having one of 100 votes over how much. Like, for instance, Carl was.
It was Carl.
It was Carl. Carl was
Rudy
Carl versus Rudy,
yeah.
and it was like, if Carl doesn't make All NBA, doesn't make X amount of money,
36
and then
million.
he's going to realize if I voted for him or not, because that becomes public. And I was like, oh, I don't like this. So I gave it up after 1 year. So I will say that sometimes if you cover a player, or if you're a national reporter, you have relationships with people, that pressure to vote for certain players might be a real thing. That's a real thing. And I'll also say that when it comes to things like whether it's like the all rookie team or the all defense team, things like that, like it's very hard for whether you're a local beat writer or just even somebody nationally covering the league. Like, it's hard to really know who's deserving of a second team all defense spot. You know what I mean? And so I do think like it is just reputation. Sometimes they look at the record, they look at maybe who is the best defender on what team. Like, I think did Shea get more all defensive team votes than Jaden did?
I voted Jaden first and second team defense.
But like, yeah, you're right. Like that stuff, that's kind of a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, sometimes boils down to reputation.
Were you there when we were literally talking to Ant about this last night?
Talking to Ant a little bit off the record about it. Obviously, Ant, and he was even on the record. He was very stumping for Jaden. Like, I don't know what the voters are looking at. This and that. Like, how is Jaden McDaniels not on the all defensive team?
Jaden, it's just blank pages.
Just angry stares in the photo section.
It's a coloring book. Yeah.
Trenches by Chris Hine. Treacherous.
But I think your perception of how the process breaks down is fairly accurate, and that's unfortunate because players do deserve, when it comes to this stuff, a fair shake of who's really deserving and who's not. And I will say I noticed you talk about Alex Caruso and what he got away with in that Denver series. I do think when it comes to officiating, and I've noticed this even when Pat Bev was on the Wolves, and I think you even see it a little bit with guys like Mike and even Nikhil at times, their reputation with the refs matters with what they can get away with on the floor. Like, I see Mike Conley grab a lot of guys or kind of hook them, and he never gets called for that. And I'm like, how is Mike getting away with this sometimes?
That's why.
But that's why. Right. If you're not wrong. If you're a smaller person guarding a larger person, you're able to get away with more because you're not seemingly affecting them to as much as if it was a larger person hacking a smaller player, right? So, but I do think reputation does matter and how guys are officiated. I used to marvel at what Pat Bev got away with during his season with the Wolves, but I think it was just because of reputation.
Pat Bev, man.
Yeah.
Last question to the guy who has had our back. I think, Dane, since it's kind of the inception of all of this, but I do want to just one more time make a ton of noise if you're here or in your car or at daycare at home for Dan and the Falling Knife crew, because this has become I'm like, seriously, like outside of Target Center, which I thought was absolutely chaotic last night. Like, this is the single best place to be in the state to watch a Wolves game. The community that Dan has grown and all his staff. Yeah. What do you got for us?
I just wanted to say basically that we really appreciate everybody that's been kind of buying into what we're trying to genuinely do here of like create a really cool and interesting place to come watch Wolves games with a bunch of nerds. I know that Dane called it out before. Yeah, right. That, you know, we all used to have to like hang out in our basement and cheer for like Alexi Shved. And so now we can actually like do this and we can come out of there and talk to people about, you know, interesting things going on here. So it honestly, if everybody here knows about it, obviously you're all the mega fans of this, but if you're listening to this elsewhere and you haven't come out from a game yet, like, it isn't me speaking from a place of like the person that owns the business and like we appreciate everybody's support in the way that we've done all of this, but like you're gonna miss out if you don't come and do this, right? Like it's really 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 fun and you're gonna make new friends and you're gonna talk about all the games and all that, and we just genuinely appreciate everybody that's been a part of it. And just there you go. Yeah, come on out tomorrow. Nobody's working, so you're all good. And Tuesdays after Memorial Day are never work days either, so it's like everybody like slowly eating donuts and wandering around like pretending to do stuff. So come on out, enjoy yourself. We've got a multitude of options. If you are consuming alcohol, we have that. Obviously, we have THC beverages. We've got NA options. We got everything for anybody that needs to come out here. A lot of questions of if it's 18 plus. And like, no, bring your kids. We love it. Make them wear dope jerseys and go from there. And then just real quick, just acknowledging 5 years ago today in Minneapolis, terrible thing happened, and we haven't really seen any reform around that yet. So keep pushing on your politicians to improve culpability to people.
And last but not least, because Dan, you're doing inside, you're doing outside. You got the TV set up. Like, it is really. I know I sound like a crazy person, but it is really important to build that next generation of Timberwolves fans. There's someone in here tonight that's married to a beautiful wife that she only knows successful Timberwolves basketball. Am I right? Okay, so again, for the next generation, bring your family, bring some lawn chairs, come to Falling Knife, because again, the Ant book is awesome and the Dane Moore podcast is awesome, but all that really matters is
That was good. Thank you all for being here. He's Chris Hine. You guys get that book, Kyle, Ultimate Hype Man. We appreciate you. Yeah. Until game 4, he's Kyle, he's Chris. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.